Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Kiorkof, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 16 running back rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, of course, we're going to be talking about all things related to the running back position. But before we begin, I want to talk about some waiver wire pickups from last night's game between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cincinnati Bengals. There are two running backs that are going to be mentioned on today's video that you may need to pick up for Week 16 championships or potentially Week 17 championships, regardless. After that, we'll talk about running back matchups, talking about which defenses are giving up the most points to opposing running backs thus far this season on average in a half PPR scoring format. After that, of course, we'll talk about my top 36 running back rankings in a half PPR scoring sense. Of course, all my rankings on a weekly basis are subject to change. If you are trying to stay up to date on my latest rankings, make sure you show up on Saturday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We'll be live streaming then because there will be 3 Saturday games, and it will also live stream Sunday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Kickoff with Kiorkof. I'll be answering questions, giving you guys updated rankings to help you guys win some fantasy football championships this season. So all of that considered, we should be having a pretty good day. I want to start off by, again, thanking you guys for the incredible support. Getting to where we are today, the amount of subscribers, the amount of views, the amount of support we're getting, whether it's here on Patreon, on Discord. I really do appreciate you guys supporting the channel and my efforts. I'm just trying to, do my best every single week to supply you guys with as much information and the best predictive rankings I could possibly come out with. Again, they're subject to change, but we'll see how this progresses. I appreciate you guys. Thank you. Happy holidays. And let's get into this, shall we? Okay, so I wanted to start off by talking about some waiver wire pickups. Of course, last night's game was a little bit of a, I'd say it's a little bit of a surprise. The Cincinnati Bengals, the 2-10 and, well, actually now they're 3-10-1. Cincinnati Bengals somehow defeated the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were formerly 11-0, are on a 3-game slide. Very interesting turn of events. But a couple things that I wanted to mention first and foremost. Of course, James Conner being inactive last night was a pretty big surprise to me. He was questionable all week, but again, Benny Snell took the job. Hopefully you had him handcuffed and or picked him up. He had a pretty good game last night. Overall, scoring a touchdown makes a pretty big difference, and also getting a good amount of touches on the ground and work in the passing game. This upcoming week, they'll take on the Indianapolis Colts, but regardless, I think as long as you need a running back, Benny Snell is an option to potentially pick up. Outside of that, on the other side of the ball, for the Cincinnati Bengals, their starting running back, Giovani Bernard, came out and was absolutely incredible. Worked in the passing game, in the running game, was able to do whatever he wanted. Had 23, 25 touches on the ground, ended up getting 2 touchdowns and dominated in that contest. Overall, I think Giovani Bernard, between him and Benny Snell, they both have a pretty good opportunity this week. I know Benny Snell has a tougher matchup, but Giovani Bernard takes on Houston and could be a potential good play this week as a flex option. Now, outside of those 2 players alone, there's a couple pieces of information that we have to mention that came out today and a little bit yesterday. So Cam Akers is going to be missing Week 16 for sure with an ankle injury of some sort. He's going to be out. Darrell Henderson and or Malcolm Brown are going to take his spot. I'm assuming Darrell Henderson will be filling in against the Seattle Seahawks. Now, outside of that, we have Raheem Mostert, who will be sent to the injured reserve. He is out for the season, season-ending injury. That's unfortunate. Again, he has been sent to the IR 3 separate times. This is the 3rd time this season. It's unfortunate. I think Jeff Wilson Jr., of course, is going to step in well for him. Jerick McKinnon / Tevin Coleman. We'll just have to see who the second back is. But regardless, I think Jeff Wilson Jr. certainly leads the backfield. And the last piece of information that we've gotten confirmation on is the report that Ronald Jones is most likely not going to play this week based on, going to the IR list as of last week, dealing with the hand surgery that he had to his pinky that was, broken, fractured. We're still dealing with that. He probably won't return this week, which is a good sign for those of you who have Leonard Fournette. Obviously played well this past week. But those are the running backs that I wanted to mention. We'll talk about other pieces of news as they filter out throughout the week. Now that we've covered that, I want to go ahead and move on to matchups at the running back position, beginning with the easiest matchups on the week. Of course, the Detroit Lions, they're giving up the most points to opposing running backs. Derrick Henry obviously was going to have himself a pretty good week. I don't think anybody's surprised about that, but a player that we just mentioned a couple moments ago was Leonard Fournette. If he has this backfield all to himself, I think this is another great opportunity for him to potentially help you capture a fantasy football championship. A player that all season long hasn't been very relevant considering the splits, the injuries, and the entire rotation of that backfield this season. It seems like he could be a clutch player that, again, if he's available, should have been picked up last week since Ronald Jones was out. But playing against the Detroit Lions, it doesn't get easier than that, in my opinion. It's a great matchup. The Houston Texans, of course, they give up a bunch of points, the most rushing yards to an opposing offense per week on average this season. I mean, again, we talked about Giovani Bernard potentially taking advantage of the matchup. They give up 1.2 touchdowns per game. Could end up going in that direction. The Jacksonville Jaguars, of course, they'll have their hands full with the running back that, as of right now, as of the last 3 weeks, has been the best running back in fantasy, which is David Montgomery. He's been lighting up the league, playing insane. We'll talk about him in a little bit, but Jacksonville, they have their hands full. Certainly, the Las Vegas Raiders, whether it is Salvon Ahmed and or Myles Gaskin, we'll see how that entire thing transpires. I think Salvon Ahmed is going to be the lead back regardless of Gaskin's return. But again, there could be some touches taken away from him. We'll talk about that. It's a fantastic matchup regardless. The Green Bay Packers will have their hands full with Derrick Henry. Again, there's a lot of good running backs in great matchups this week. And to be honest, the thing is, the running back position as of right now, though there are a lot of guys that we can trust, being able to key in on a better matchup in a fantasy championship round, that is the biggest difference maker. This is what we prepared our lineups for. A lot of you went and made trades prior to the fantasy playoffs beginning in order to take advantage of said games. Miles Sanders playing against the Dallas Cowboys, one of the easiest matchups out there. We have Aaron Jones playing against Tennessee, of course, another easy matchup, another one of these players. I mean, we talked about Aaron Jones, we talked about Derrick Henry and David Montgomery, the three best matchups for the fantasy playoffs. I mean, these guys obviously have taken advantage of it, to say the very least. We also have some other great matchups for, running backs playing against the Carolina Panthers. That'll be great for whether or not Antonio Gibson returns. I think J.D. McKissic, regardless of who's in that backfield, should be able to dominate and play well. We also have the New York Giants. Of course, they're giving up a fair share of points to opposing running backs. That'll be great for J.K. Dobbins going into this week. Whoever plays against the Seattle Seahawks, I'm assuming, of course, Darrell Henderson will be the starter there. Should be good. But either way, these are some of the better matchups at the running back position. Of course, I want to cover some of the tougher matchups. The New Orleans Saints, who have given up yards to everybody in the last 2 weeks. We'll talk about that, how they've declined very swiftly. The Pittsburgh Steelers, another one of these teams that have struggled heavily as of late to opposing running backs because their offense just isn't functioning. Therefore, the opposing offenses are getting more opportunities and scoring more often, which really wasn't a thing all season long until just recently. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we've seen some weaknesses here and there. Of course, Dalvin Cook take advantage of them. Maybe DeAndre Swift could end up doing something in the passing game and giving himself some relevancy. But either way, just giving you some perspective as to some of the better matchups. Even in some of these tough matchups, we have seen, again, we saw Miles Sanders dominate against the Saints. We saw Giovani Bernard torch the Pittsburgh Steelers. We saw Dalvin Cook destroy Tampa Bay. The Washington football team, as of late, they've looked better and better as a front seven or defense. But, I mean, you can go back earlier this season. They've given up a pretty good game here and there. And maybe Mike Davis takes advantage of it. The Los Angeles Rams couldn't stop Frank Gore, for the love of God, last week. Tony Pollard destroyed the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, Leonard Fournette put up 20 points against the Falcons. So again, there are a lot of these defenses that even though they're better at stopping running backs, they still just aren't prone to an occasional beatdown by an opposing offense and offensive line that's really running the ball effectively. But either way, now that we've covered that, we can move on to our top 36 running back rankings for Week 16 of the 2020 fantasy football season. Again, if you've made it this far and you've watched the entire intro to the video, I really do appreciate that. Thank you very much. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel, click the like button, and comment down below. Let me know who you guys think is going to be the secret player of the week that may not be in this top 24 conversation, that may be the biggest difference of whether or not you win or lose. Who's the sneaky player that a lot of us will be talking about at the beginning of next season as the guy that captured our championships for us? I kind of want to get an idea from you guys, what you guys think on the matter. But now that we've covered that, let's get into it. Beginning off with our number one running back on the week, the thumbnail himself. We have to break out Derrick Henry again on the thumbnail because, again, he has been incredible. Just in the last 2 games, he has had 362 total yards and 3 touchdowns. Derrick Henry's coming off of a fantastic contest in which he dominated the opposing defense. 147 yards, a rushing touchdown. Got himself some work in the passing game. No big deal. The touches are there, the opportunities there, and he plays against the Green Bay Packers defense. I know the Green Bay Packers were able to shut down Mike Davis, but again, that offense for the Carolina Panthers, they're nothing close to what the Tennessee Titans are right now. That Tennessee Titans offense is humming with Tannehill scoring 5 touchdowns. They are just on a different level currently. Corey Davis, A.J. Brown, that defense, I mean, they're all just firing on all cylinders. And therefore, I think Derrick Henry, of course, is going to dominate. The one stat that I wanted to mention, Derrick Henry has had 100-plus rushing yards in 9 consecutive away games. Luckily for him this week and in the following week, he has back-to-back away games. Should be a dominant force this week and should help you win a championship. We have our number 2, Dalvin Cook, for this week. 132 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown. Had himself 5 catches for 27 yards. His receiving work is so sneakily underrated. The amount of receptions he gets per week is unbelievable. But again, he put up another 24.4 point performance. Plays the New Orleans Saints this week. All you really have to do is go back. Let's look at the 2019 NFL playoffs. They played against the New Orleans Saints. And what did Dalvin Cook do? He dominated. He had 28 rushing attempts, 94 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 3 receptions on 5 targets for 36 rushing yards. He absolutely destroyed that defense. Regardless, even though the New Orleans Saints at the time, again, we're still one of the best run-stopping defenses, they just got torched by Dalvin Cook. He is not susceptible to any of these tough run-stopping defenses. Just talking about the last 2 weeks, he played against Tampa Bay, had 102 yards and a rushing touchdown. Against Chicago last week, in which he struggled earlier this season, 132 yards and a touchdown. Nobody can stop Dalvin Cook. That offense is foolproof. Regardless of what you put in front of him, he is going to dominate. And when we're talking about what the New Orleans Saints have given up as of late, they can't stop the run. Miles Sanders, 136 yards and 2 touchdowns, along with CEH and Le'Veon Bell just this past week combining for 159 total yards and a touchdown. I don't see the New Orleans Saints being able to stop this running attack from Dalvin Cook. He's absolutely going to be a fantastic play this week as our number 2, of course. Number 3 is Alvin Kamara. So Alvin Kamara got lucky, scored a touchdown last week. He wasn't getting as much utilization in the passing as we predicted with the return of Drew Brees, but I think that kind of gets back into line this upcoming week. Let's talk about what the Minnesota Vikings have given up to opposing running backs just recently. David Montgomery's coming off of a week in which he had 159 total yards and 2 total touchdowns against that defense. Ronald Jones recently 84 yards and a touchdown, while also James Robinson 108 yards and a touchdown. We have seen this defense for the Minnesota Vikings, of course, give up a lot of points. But here's the thing about Alvin Kamara. In the last 3 games, he has had a minimum of 94 total yards and a singular touchdown in the last 3 games, back to back to back. That's great. That means you're getting a solid base floor of production in about that 15 plus point range, not even including the fact that he's probably going to have a boatload of receptions. When we're talking about the kind of receptions that I'm mentioning, prior to Drew Brees leaving with his injury earlier this season with the rib cage and all that, he was averaging 7.4 receptions per game. So again, Alvin Kamara could get a lot of work in the passing game this week, which I absolutely anticipate. Could get himself some more touchdowns and opportunity. He's in a pretty good spot this week as our number 3. Number 4 is David Montgomery. I mentioned it a little bit earlier when we were talking about matchups, but David Montgomery's been an absolute animal. In the last 4 games, he has averaged 24.9 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format. He is absolutely dominating because the matchups are in his favor and this offense is effectively running the ball more than they have in many years. I haven't seen the Chicago Bears offense run the ball like this in a very long time. David Montgomery's coming off of a game of 32 rushing attempts for 146 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 1 catch for 16 yards. Again, he plays against the Jacksonville Jaguars, giving up some of the most points to opposing running backs this season. Just recently, of course, the Jacksonville Jaguars last week to the Ravens running backs, Gus Edwards and, of course, J.K. Dobbins. Those 2 running backs combined for 159 yards and a touchdown. Derrick Henry, the week prior to that, 222 yards and 2 touchdowns. Dalvin Cook, 179 yards against the Jacksonville defense. And the Browns duo of Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb combined for 238 yards and a touchdown. No one can stop David Montgomery. As of late, he's just been one of the best running backs in the National Football League. He's been the number 1 running back in the last 3 weeks of fantasy in half PPR. He's a fantastic play and for sure capturing championships for many of you. Aaron Jones is our number 5, another one of these running backs that has a great matchup playing against the Tennessee Titans this week. Tennessee, just this past week, DeAndre Swift, 82 yards, 2 touchdowns. Nick Chubb the week before, 106 and a touchdown. J.K. Dobbins, 85 and 1. Nyheim Hines, even in the game earlier this season, 115 total yards and 2 touchdowns. Tennessee can't stop the run. Tennessee's defense just really isn't capable of stopping anybody in general. And they kind of get away with it because, again, when you allow Derrick Henry to run the ball and dominate as much as they do, it really makes it hard for opposing offenses to come out and have to try to score as much. But I think Aaron Jones, this Green Bay Packers offense, they will be up to the task. Aaron Jones is coming off of a fantastic week against Carolina Panthers, 145 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown, 3 catches for 13 yards. Again, this is one of the more advantageous matchups, and this is why we wanted Aaron Jones late in the season. He's got himself a pretty good chance to dominating this week. Austin Ekeler is our number 6. My only concern with Austin Ekeler is obviously Kalen Ballage. Is Kalen Ballage going to come in and yoink a touchdown? Is Justin Herbert at the end of the game going to go for a QB dive instead of handing off the ball to Austin Ekeler? That in itself is a little bit concerning, but with that said, Austin Ekeler has so much upside and such a safe floor based on his work on the ground and, of course, in the PPR format. Getting himself 4 catches on 4 targets last week, that's not the greatest game that we've seen. We've seen 11 catches on 16 targets. We've seen that multiple times this season alone. So the question is, what can we potentially anticipate from Austin Ekeler this week? He's playing against the Denver Broncos. That Denver defense really hasn't stopped running backs in quite some time. In the last 3 weeks, back to back to back. Of course, Zach Moss and Devin Singletary this past week, they combined for 165 yards and a touchdown. Mike Davis the week prior, 93 yards, 2 touchdowns. Latavius Murray in that game. Of course, Alvin Kamara was still present, but Latavius Murray dominated in the second half, 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think Austin Ekeler has himself a very safe opportunity to not only be able to compete in this game, which should be a higher scoring format, back and forth between these two teams that defensively cannot stop anybody. But I think, of course, his PPR work gives him a solid base floor, and he potentially has the upside of a touchdown. He's my number 6. Number 7 is Nick Chubb. Now, the reason I have Nick Chubb lower than he typically is on a weekly basis is mainly because of the New York Jets defense. Now, I know the New York Jets defense, they've given up a lot of points as of late. I know they beat the Los Angeles Rams, and that leaves a little bit of a salty taste in my mouth, but does that really affect Nick Chubb? The thing is, Nick Chubb is coming off of 4 consecutive games of scoring a touchdown. Even though this past week against the New York Giants, he wasn't able to find the greatest production, only had 50 rushing yards and 2 catches for 16 yards. So 66 total yards, a touchdown. We'll take a 13.6 point performance. That's not something that we're obviously too ecstatic about, but it's a good enough performance. If in fact this game leads to Baker Mayfield having to throw the ball 30 times again, this could eventually diminish the value of a Nick Chubb, but I'm hoping that's not going to be the case. I'm hoping Nick Chubb can find some gaps, find some productivity, and won't get shut down by this defense that, again, their best aspect of that defense overall is their defensive line. If Quinnen Williams is out, then we have an even better opportunity for Nick Chubb. But regardless, he's a guy that you're auto-starting. We don't even need to mention why. He's just been so great all season long. Since his return, he's been one of the best running backs in the National Football League for sure. We have Miles Sanders as our number 8 option. Now, he plays against the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas, they themselves all season long, I think they've been only behind the Houston Texans in terms of yards given up to opposing running backs per week on the ground. Just talking about some running back performances against them recently, the 49ers duo of Raheem Mostert and, of course, Jeff Wilson Jr. had 128 yards and a touchdown just this past Sunday. We had the Ravens duo, or trio, whatever you want to call it, go for 172 and a touchdown. And Antonio Gibson recently, 136 yards and 3 touchdowns against that defense on Thanksgiving Day. So again, we have Miles Sanders coming off of a performance in which, of course, he was shut down mainly because that Cardinals defense was a lot better than we anticipated. I do think that this duo of Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders is going to dominate against Dallas's defense. They're going to have a hard time being able to contain Jalen Hurts, and then also have to deal with the fact that once that backside defensive end can't commit to, screaming down the line of scrimmage and being able to stop a guy like Miles Sanders because Jalen Hurts shows so much of a threat of keeping the read option, there's going to be more opportunities for Miles Sanders to break it out and have himself a pretty good performance this upcoming week as our number 8 running back. Number 9 is Josh Jacobs, coming off of an insane game. To be honest, the fact that Derek Carr could get injured and that offense was just as good as they normally were, if not better with Marcus Mariota, was pretty interesting to see. Having 26 rushing attempts for 76 total yards and a touchdown, we'll take that. 3 catches out of the backfield for 38 yards. Overall, that's a pretty good game. Now, he plays against the Miami Dolphins, one of the better defenses in terms of stopping the run. Just recently, they've been pretty solid in terms of stopping opposing running backs. But, there's the occasional game where Melvin Gordon will dominate 2 touchdowns over, 60 total yards on the ground. That in itself is definitely a main possibility this week. The question is, how is this defense going to be able to react to the offense of the Oakland Raiders? They've only seen 3 quarters of Marcus Mariota. Of course, this offensive coordinator, their entire team, they're going to add more to the potential run threat of a Marcus Mariota. That will obviously, just like we talked about with Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders, give more opportunity to the running back to not have to see a defensive end come down the line of scrimmage and make a play on them because of the threat of the quarterback running. I think this is a pretty good spot for Josh Jacobs this week. Again, always has the ability to score, always will be their goal line back. He should play a little bit more, hopefully, because there's always, Devontae Booker stealing the 3rd drive of every game. But I think Josh Jacobs should be pretty good this week either way. Our next running back for this week and our number 10 is Tony Pollard, running back of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, obviously, this is contingent on whether or not Ezekiel Elliott is going to play this week. If Zeke plays, of course, we're going to have to rate him lower. I don't think Zeke is as good of a back as Tony Pollard right now in the current opportunity, in the current way that this offense is functioning. As it currently stands, Tony Pollard is coming off of 120 plus all scrimmage yards, 2 touchdowns, 6 catches on 9 targets, and playing against this Philadelphia defense, again, that has given up some points to running backs. Even though Kenyan Drake wasn't able to find success, Chase Edmonds comes in, gets work in the passing game, on the ground, scores a touchdown, over 14 fantasy points, a great performance. Alvin Kamara, the week prior to that, against this Philadelphia defense, 94 yards and a touchdown. Aaron Jones, 148 and a touchdown recently. Nick Chubb, 114 yards on the ground against that defense just a couple weeks back. So again, Philadelphia's defense, they are not that ultimate run-stopping defense they used to be in years prior. Back in 2018, it was a defense that we had to worry about. But right now, as they currently stand, the way that secondary is working, the fact that they have to play it, back as far as they do, it is not the run support that we once saw from those safeties and corners. As of this current moment in time, I think Tony Pollard, if he's given the opportunity and there is no Zeke, he's an automatic pickup, and there's a reason why he was the number 1 waiver and play this week as a potential league winning, starter that honestly could end up getting another 20-point bomb if the, offense goes and progresses the way we anticipated to do against the Philadelphia Eagles defense. Either way, we move on to our number 11. We have Jonathan Taylor. Now, I understand Jonathan Taylor plays against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but to be honest, as of the last couple weeks, I don't really fear the Pittsburgh Steelers upfront defense, considering, of course, how successful the Indianapolis Colts run offense has been. Of course, Jonathan Taylor's coming off of a 17.5-point performance in a half PPR, 4 catches for 12 yards on top of it. He had 16 total rushing attempts, 20 total opportunities. We'll take that. 83 yards on the ground and a rushing touchdown against the Houston Texans. Just as of the last 3 weeks, Jonathan Taylor has been the number 2 running back in half PPR, only behind David Montgomery. He has been absolutely fantastic and has definitely found himself really gelling with this offense and taking advantage of why he should be the starter with Marlon Mack going down earlier this season. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, why doesn't it scare me anymore? If teams like the Cincinnati Bengals on a Monday night can really show up and dominate against you on the ground like that with Giovani Bernard, what did Giovani Bernard go for? He had himself 25 carries for 83 yards. You got to be kidding me, right? Giovani Bernard's doing that to you? Imagine what this offense, in the Indianapolis Colts offense specifically, with that offensive line is going to be able to impose. Of course, you expect Pittsburgh to bounce back, but you would have thought they were going to bounce back after the first 2 losses. Now that they've hit 3, they're on the slide. And I think Jonathan Taylor can certainly take advantage of the matchup. And regardless, a lot of people may be saying, what if in fact they do bounce back? Well, Jonathan Taylor caught the ball 4 times last week. He is a deceptively good receiving back. I think he has 31 receptions this season. So again, could be another one of these PPR threats that gets himself more opportunity than has the goal line touches. Our number 12 for this week is J.K. Dobbins, running back of the Baltimore Ravens. So J.K. Dobbins in the last 4 games has had a minimum of 50 rushing yards and a singular rushing touchdown in each contest. That in itself, that stability, that is just pure consistency, and the offense is continuing to lean in his direction. He is the starting back. They want to give him the job. They are doing so. Mark Ingram was inactive this last week. Gus Edwards isn't getting as many touches. Lamar, of course, he's going to work, but J.K. Dobbins is the starting running back. And now that we can finally establish this, we are 100% buying in on the idea of starting him as a top 12 running back against the New York Giants. Of course, they're giving up the 10th most points to opposing running backs this season. It is an advantageous matchup in my eyes, and I can certainly see J.K. Dobbins and Lamar Jackson with that duo combination of just being able to pound the rock, dominating against this defense, and of course finding themselves in the end zone. I think J.K. Dobbins is an automatic play considering his recent consistency. And if you're the starting running back of the Baltimore Ravens, you're typically an automatic start. That was the case last season. That's still been the case this season, but it's been a little bit of a trickier situation trying to at least find who the starting running back is. Now that they've established it, it's good to go. We have DeAndre Swift as our number 13 overall running back. So here's the thing. DeAndre Swift's coming off a great performance against Tennessee. Of course, we mentioned earlier, 2 touchdowns, 67 rushing yards, 4 catches for 15 yards. But he plays against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, something that many of us should be concerned about. But I'm honestly not afraid of it. I don't know what it is, but these tough matchups, I'm beginning to feel that there really isn't a solid defense in the National Football League that can stop anything. There's a lot of these offenses have really found their groove. And now that we've gotten to week 16, it's going to be really tough to just outright stop a running back and or an entire offense from functioning the way that they typically do. Now, the reason that kind of back my thought process as of right now is, Dalvin Cook a couple weeks back went for 110 yards and a touchdown. Now, Dalvin Cook's a different animal, I understand, but the Falcons running backs just this past week had a total of 9 receptions and 65 receiving yards. That, in my mind, continues to at least buy in the direction that I'm thinking that DeAndre Swift is going to be used. He has had 8 consecutive games of 3+ catches out of this backfield, and that's where he finds more and more of his value. Getting himself work in the passing game, being able to just rack up yards, receptions, that is going to give him a baseline of value on top of the idea that he is going to be the goal line back. He's going to get a lot of touches throughout this game, and if in fact he can connect and find himself some success, he could very easily be a top 12 back. As of right now, I have him at 13 because, again, in comparison to some of these other running backs, he doesn't get as much opportunity, but I still think that as of right now, should be a fantastic play as a number 13. Number 14 is Melvin Gordon. So Melvin Gordon gets another shot at this revenge game against the Los Angeles Chargers. It's going to be an interesting one, but he's coming off of a great game, against this Buffalo Bills defense, even though the game script wasn't even on his side. He only had 11 rushing attempts, but with those opportunities, 61 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, got himself work in the passing game, 4 targets, 4 receptions, 20 yards. Philip Lindsay completely disappeared in this offense, does not exist. And it's good to see that at least just this past week, Josh Jacobs was able to impose as well 114 total yards and a touchdown against that Los Angeles Chargers defense that has not been good for the majority of the season in terms of stopping running backs on the ground. Just as of late, Melvin Gordon has found his stride. He's had 10+ point fantasy performances in 4 out of the last 5 weeks. In those 5 weeks, he's been the number 9 overall running back in fantasy. I think as of right now, the number 14 spot is perfect for him as an automatic start. We have Kenyan Drake as our next running back. So here's the thing. I know Kenyan Drake did not perform. 10 total rushing attempts for 26 yards is not going to cut it. 5 fantasy points in week 15 was obviously the biggest difference whether or not you made the playout or you made it to week 16. And if you did and you were able to, here's my thought process for Kenyan Drake. Playing against the San Francisco 49ers, of course, we just saw Tony Pollard go off for 120+ yards, 2 touchdowns. But that's not the only thing and the only reason I'm kind of buying in on the idea of playing Kenyan Drake against the 49ers. It's mainly because the Cardinals have played very well against the 49ers as of the last 2 seasons. Just in week 1, the Arizona Cardinals, they beat the San Francisco 49ers, and Kenyan Drake certainly helped. 65 total yards and a rushing touchdown. Now, in the last 3 contests, going back to even 2019, including the 2020 week 1 contest, in the last 3 games against the San Francisco 49ers, Kenyan Drake has had 302 total yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. That, in my opinion, obviously accompanied by a couple receptions here and there, just seems like he is going to be automatically in a pretty good opportunity here. Chase Edmonds obviously steals value here and there, but not enough to make me think that Kenyan Drake isn't a play this week as our number 15. David Johnson's coming off of an insane week. We knew Duke Johnson, Buddy Howell was going to be missing. We knew he was going to be the only running back in this backfield, but getting 11 targets, 11 receptions for 106 receiving yards, being a legitimate wide receiver for this Houston Texans offense was an insane, turn of events in my opinion. We haven't seen David Johnson really get utilized out of this backfield in the passing game all season long. And we knew him for just that. I mean, when he was at the Arizona Cardinals, regardless of who was at the quarterback position, that offense wanted to pass the ball to their running backs, and they certainly did. But the thing is, David Johnson wasn't utilized earlier this season, had an incredible performance against the Indianapolis Colts, only had 8 rushing attempts, but getting a total of 19 touches. That ties his most this season. So as of right now, playing against the Cincinnati Bengals, who of course gave up 170 yards and a touchdown to Benny Snell. Wayne Gallman, 94 and a touchdown. Antonio Gibson, 104 and 1 touchdown just as of late. Cincinnati has been, a defense that really can't stop opposing running backs, and I can certainly see David Johnson having himself a pretty good performance this week as our number 16. Our number 17 for this week is Chris Carson, running back of the Seattle Seahawks. So I'm not too concerned about him. I think he's getting a good amount of touches. He's just not getting all the touches. The fact that Carlos Hyde, we have a little bit of Rashard Penny momentum starting to build, that is concerning to me. But as of late, the Los Angeles Chargers, they have had a very rough go at it in terms of stopping running backs. In just the last couple of performances, of course, Frank Gore, 65 total yards and a touchdown. Kenyan Drake, 58 and 1. Raheem Mostert, 43 and 1. A stat that I wanted to mention because, of course, I follow everything the Rams do as they break my heart every week. In 6 out of the last 7 games, there's been at least 1 rushing touchdown against this defense. I think the Seattle Seahawks, who have been a slower offense in terms of scoring, haven't been as effective through the air, will have a tough time this week, and they'll have to turn to running the ball. Chris Carson will be able to succeed, and I think he could potentially score a touchdown. He's just not getting all the touches. The fact that Carlos Hyde could touch one and go to the house, it scares me. That kind of volatility could end up hurting you overall. But again, I still think he's an automatic play as a top 17 guy. Our number 18 is Salvon Ahmed. So again, here's the thing. If Myles Gaskin plays, Salvon Ahmed sits at number 18 regardless. Now, if he doesn't, I'm moving him immediately to number 13. He's going to jump all the way in front of DeAndre Swift and is an automatic, even better play this week against the Las Vegas Raiders because the Raiders cannot stop the run. The Chargers duo, of course, of Austin Ekeler and Kalen Ballage went for 90 yards and a touchdown. Jonathan Taylor 165 and 2 touchdowns. Ty Johnson 117 and a touchdown. The Falcons duo of Ito Smith and Brian Hill 130 and a touchdown. The Falcons, I mean, they're not even a good running back crew, but they were still able to dominate against this Las Vegas Raiders defense. Salvon Ahmed coming off of a week in which he had 23 total touches on the ground for 112 yards and a touchdown. My goodness. I mean, if he's the starting back and he's the lone back, he should dominate. Even when he's not the lone back and Myles Gaskin is going to come in and take some touches, I'm not even worried about it. I still think that Salvon Ahmed is a fantastic play this week. James Robinson's our number 19. He's dealing with an ankle injury, and that is why I put him this low. That being said, he also does play against the Chicago Bears. Now, the Chicago Bears, as of the last couple of weeks, I know Dalvin Cook had a great performance, 159 and a touchdown. AP recently went for 57 yards and 2 touchdowns against that defense. That's all, well, but James Robinson in the last 2 weeks has seen the lowest amount of offensive snaps in his entire season, mainly because, again, he's getting injured. We're seeing a lot of usage from these other running backs in this backfield. Darrell Henderson coming in, Zigbo. I mean, they're just a rotation of guys that are taking touches away from him, taking opportunity away from him. And if, in fact, this lingering ankle injury is going to continue to bother James Robinson, then why would we, want to have to immediately play him in this matchup? If he's good to go, if he's a full play or not limited all week long, I feel more confident with it. Many of you may not have the opportunity to go elsewhere. I still think he's a good play because he has touchdown upside, work in the passing game, gets great amount of opportunity on the ground. But again, it's just the ankle injury that concerns me. We'll see, and we'll keep you guys up to date as the week progresses. The next player on our list is Leonard Fournette. With Ronald Jones potentially missing this week, that opens up even more opportunity for Leonard Fournette to dominate against the Detroit Lions defense. Like I've mentioned, giving up a lot of points. 147 yards and a touchdown to Derrick Henry, 111 yards and 2 touchdowns to David Montgomery recently. I honestly think that Leonard Fournette, coming off of a game in which he had 49 rushing yards, 16 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, should be able to dominate against this defense. This offense should take a lead, and then of course Leonard Fournette should be running the ball for majority of the second half, imposing his will. We have J.D. McKissic as our number 21. Now, I don't know who the quarterback is going to be. Is it going to be Alex Smith? Is it going to be Dwayne Haskins? Dwayne Haskins, he played a decent game. They didn't win, but he played a decent game, and he's going to the strip club on Sunday. I don't know what to do with that offense, but the thing that we have noticed in the last 2 weeks is that J.D. McKissic is the starting running back of this team. He is getting more touches on the ground, even though he's not getting the goal line work. I expect it to eventually come. He's coming off of a game in which he had 51 rushing yards on 13 carries. Great. 10 targets, 9 receptions, 56 yards, and a receiving touchdown. 21.1 points. Plays against the Carolina Panthers, who, of course, we know can't stop running backs. Aaron Jones, 158 yards and a touchdown this last week. I think if J.D. McKissic, regardless of who's at quarterback, is going to get those targets, he is a fantastic play. Even maybe a much higher play if, in fact, we can definitively say, and announce one of the quarterbacks. If it's Dwayne Haskins again, I'm 100% all in on it. And, of course, if Antonio Gibson's out, we're good to go. Our number 22 for this week is Jeff Wilson Jr. Now, here's the thing. Jeff Wilson Jr. is going to be the starting running back of this team as Raheem Mostert is on the injured reserve. Now, again, we should have picked him up in weeks prior. He's getting a good amount of opportunity. 16 rushing attempts, 4 targets this last week, 60 total rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown to make his week. I think playing against the Arizona Cardinals, which in my opinion is a very advantageous matchup going back to earlier this season, week 1, this running attack was able to impose their will. Running backs on the San Francisco 49ers were able to get work in the passing game and score 2 receiving touchdowns in the week 1 contest. Raheem Mostert and Jerick McKinnon. So I think Jeff Wilson getting targets, getting opportunity should be in his direction. There's a potential. Jimmy Garoppolo and George Kittle return this week, making this offense even more deadly and more of a threat. Could be a good sign for Jeff Wilson's upside. We have Le'Veon Bell as our number 23. I'm pretty much ranking him where I typically would rank Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think the opportunity is going to be similar. I think the ability to be able to score a touchdown is obviously going to be there, but not getting enough work in the passing game definitely diminishes their overall base value and their floor. Their ceiling is going to always be up there as they're associated with Patrick Mahomes. Playing against Atlanta, one of the better run-stopping defenses in the National Football League. But as of late, Leonard Fournette, 65 yards, 2 touchdowns. Austin Ekeler went for 146 total yards against them. Alvin Kamara, 97 yards and a touchdown. We've seen running backs succeed against this team. I think Le'Veon Bell can certainly do so, and that is why we should definitely be picking him up, and we're playing him this week. Darrell Henderson's our number 24. Now, the thing that Darrell Henderson kind of brings to the table is the fact that he's the starting running back of this Los Angeles Rams team. The starting running back of the Rams is typically associated with touchdowns. We go back to the early days. We even go back to this season. There have been a lot of rushing touchdowns for this team. And the last time they played against the Seattle Seahawks, this attack on the ground had 99 total yards and 3 rushing touchdowns against Seattle. So that is a very good sign for the potential of a Darrell Henderson this week if they continue to just pile on the ground, which they always do. They are a run-first team in Los Angeles. So as it currently stands, we also just saw this past week the Washington football team, J.D. McKissic, Peyton Barber combined for 112 total yards and 2 touchdowns. The Giants running backs as a whole combined for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns against Seattle. This defense has been struggling. I think Darrell Henderson certainly will be able to take advantage of it as our number 24 for this week. We have Mike Davis as our number 25. This is where I begin to get worried. I think Washington's front four has been incredible in the last couple of weeks. Is Mike Davis up for the task at hand, considering Teddy Bridgewater isn't giving them enough opportunities to get down there? Sure, he gets down to the 1 yard line, fumbles. If maybe he fails that, they run it in the next play. It's a pretty big swing. You get a 6-point swing there for Mike Davis. But unfortunately, we're not at the point where we're 100% confident there. I myself personally don't know if Christian McCaffrey's going to play. If he does, he's an automatic top 5 play. But with Mike Davis as it currently stands, not getting enough work in the passing game last week, playing against a tough defense, I think it's going to be tough for him to score this week. That's just my opinion. We'll see how it progresses. As of right now, he's my number 25. Number 26 is Kareem Hunt. Now, his volatility bothers me so much that it is similar to the idea of Mike Davis. One week they can have 20, and the other week they can have 6. And that in itself, in a championship game, in a matchup where I'm not 100% confident he is going to score in, begins to make me think, maybe I don't want to start Kareem Hunt this week. Maybe I want to leave him on my bench and just let it ride out. Because to be honest, if I have one of these better options, I myself am certainly going to play them ahead of Kareem Hunt this week. I'll take any of these other running backs ahead of him. But again, you may not have the opportunity to do so. And if and when you have to play Kareem Hunt this week, you have to play him as a flex. I don't know if he's an RB2 value right now. Without scoring touchdowns, he just really hasn't been the running back that we saw earlier this season. We have Devin Singletary as our number 27. He's playing against the New England Patriots, and that is the easiest matchup at the running back position as the last 2 weeks. I mean, it really has been. They are just giving up a boatload of yards. Ahmed went for 127 and a touchdown. We saw Akers go for 194 total yards. Kenyan Drake, 92 and 2 touchdowns. The New England Patriots cannot stop the run. Devin Singletary, 8 carries for 68 yards and a touchdown. 3 catches on 3 targets for 16 yards against the Denver Broncos just this past Saturday. So again, I think Devin Singletary, if he can lead this backfield, can certainly find some success once this team takes their lead and runs it late. We have Benny Snell as our number 28 overall running back, coming off of a game, 84 yards on the ground and a touchdown, 3 catches for 23 yards. I mean, honestly, I think Benny Snell, not a bad play, but it's the Indianapolis Colts defense that worries me a little bit. With this offense not wanting to run the ball as much as they have in weeks prior. I mean, early in the season, this team ran the ball consistently. Then they lost that, and they've stopped running the ball, and they've lost their ability to impose their will on defense, kill clock, and be able to set themselves up for success. There's been a lot of 3rd and long situations, and Big Ben is getting a lot of pressure in his face. I think they need to continue to reestablish the run. Hopefully, Benny Snell will help them do that this week as a number 28. 29 is Giovani Bernard, again, another running back that was in that Monday night matchup. I think the Houston Texans, like we mentioned, all season long have been awful. Just in the last couple weeks, Jonathan Taylor, 95 and 1 touchdown. Him again in the matchup a couple weeks back, 135 and a touchdown. David Montgomery, 155 and a touchdown. This defense cannot stop giving up points to running backs. I think if the Cincinnati Bengals are going to be up to the task and could potentially win this game, it'll be a competitive one. I don't think they beat the Texans, but I certainly think that Giovani Bernard could find some success in the matchup. Frank Gore as a number 30. Again, he's old reliable. If he's going to get 23 touches on the ground, 1 through the air, 24 total touches. I mean, in terms of opportunity, he is just surpassing so many other running backs in the current fantasy landscape. Is unbelievable. Playing against Cleveland, I don't think it's that tough of a matchup. I honestly think he could easily score in this game, and therefore I have him at number 30. He is an RB3 option with the upside of scoring a touchdown, which he's done multiple times recently. Not a bad play. Chase Edmonds is our number 31. Of course, if Chase Edmonds is going to come in and take over and get more work from Kenyan Drake, then of course Kenyan Drake's value has to diminish. I know Kenyan Drake dealing with it, a couple injuries. We'll see how that progresses through the week. But as it currently stands, Chase Edmonds has a floor of about 8 points. If he can get more work on the ground like he did last week, 11 rushing attempts. I think that's the most he's seen all season long. I mean, of course, in games in which Kenyan Drake was active. But outside of that, if he can score a touchdown, it increases his value. I think the potential of that happening is certainly there in a matchup that should be higher scoring between these two teams. I think he's not a bad play at all. Zach Moss is number 32. Again, playing against New England, it's an easy matchup. If you run the ball majority of the time and you run it consistently, you are going to find success. I mean, Zach Moss is coming off of a week in which he had 13 carries for 81 yards against that Denver Broncos defense, which is, in my opinion, far better than what New England has put up on the field as of the last couple of weeks. On top of the fact that New England's, their secondary is going to be struggling, that is going to extend drives for this Buffalo Bills offense, who is trying to obviously dominate and claim an even higher playoff position. As it currently stands, I think they're a fantastic play this week. Zach Moss and Devin Singletary should both find success. We move on to Nyheim Hines as number 33. Nyheim Hines has, in my opinion, similar value to a Chase Edmonds. I think they're very similar, but again, touches are going to make the biggest difference. I know Pittsburgh, as of late, hasn't been great, but they can certainly stop the run. And if it forces them to have to pass the ball, Nyheim Hines can definitely have himself one of those 2 touchdown games. That's always on the table with Phillip Rivers at the quarterback position. But that being said, I still think to be safe, he is in this low 30 range because, again, he's not a guy that is automatically going to get himself 12 touches a game. If that was the case, then we certainly start him a little bit higher. In comparison to a guy like Kareem Hunt, who gets similar amount of touches to him, I think certainly Kareem Hunt has more opportunity getting touches because he also gets goal line carries in comparison to Hines, who obviously is getting a little bit of a lesser opportunity at those touches just recently. Sony Michel is our number 34. So I'm assuming Damian Harris is going to continue to miss games. If that's the case, Sony Michel didn't play bad this last week. I mean, in terms of a total offensive game script and how it was going to progress, getting blown out isn't the best way of going about it. The Miami Dolphins took a lead and they continued to command that lead. Sony Michel still had 10 carries for 74 yards, averaging 7.4 yards per carry. That's fantastic. And if you can go ahead and do that against the Buffalo Bills and maybe find the end zone, he could be a decent play this week. And that is why we continue to mention him as an option. The last couple options I wanted to mention is Wayne Gallman, number 35. Wayne Gallman, he's getting touches taken away from him by Alfred Morris. We're seeing Dion Lewis. I mean, maybe Devontae Freeman wants to come back and steal carries. I mean, at this point, it's a rotation. I mean, he has lost all command of this backfield, which he had for about 5-6 weeks. He lost all command of it, and that in itself has made me just completely fall off the Wayne Gallman train, unfortunately. Giants running backs until 2021 are not going to be relevant. So we'll just go ahead and leave him at 35. The last option I wanted to mention is Ito Smith. Raheem Morris, the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, has come out and said that Todd Gurley is no longer the starting running back. His role is going to be different, obviously, because he's injured. And Ito Smith will take on the starting role. In this current matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs, Ito Smith could easily catch the ball, could easily find the end zone, and be a decent play this week. That is why I wanted to mention him. Last but definitely not least, because there are running backs that I didn't mention on today's video, which maybe will make the list as the week progresses based on injuries, different circumstances, as we see it. Either way, thank you everybody for watching. I appreciate you guys supporting the channel, watching through. If you haven't yet already, subscribe to the channel, click the like button down below. Tomorrow we'll be talking about wide receivers for week 16. Thank you everybody for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.